The Practical Animal channel is dedicated to the public understanding of conservation by showcasing what conservationists do. These are their stories. Today's guest is an expert in animal behaviour, or ethology. Nikki Plaskett is founder and director at Shaping Behaviour, a zoo consultancy near London. She is a genius at eliciting behaviours from animals. If animal training interests you, just listen to her story, which comes at the end. I began by asking her which animals she trains. Her answer may surprise you.
To be perfectly honest, I train everything. So I work primarily with exotics, so usually with zoos and college collections rather than people's pets. But I work quite a lot with domestic stock in farm parks as well. So anything that needs to be trained, I can help you train it.
That's brilliant. Why, Nikki, is an understanding of animal behaviour useful for working with animals?
To be honest, behaviour is everything, right? It's everything that we do. It's everything that our animals do all the time. It's happening constantly. Being aware of what behaviours your animals are exhibiting, and particularly if any of those behaviours are problematic for you or for the animal, it's so valuable. Like, I don't think it can be underestimated, really. Once you understand what you're looking at and what you're looking for, it means that you're able to make a plan to intervene if you need to, change things in the environment, change the dynamics of the group of animals that you've got. Knowing behaviour it's one of the most important things that you can have when you're working with animals, because it's invaluable, really.
It's such a fascinating area. And I was just reading on the website now, you've actually categorised some behaviours. So desired behaviours might include crating, weighing, recall, shifting on cue, interacting with enrichment, and stationing on view. I'd like to talk about stationing on view. What's that, Nikki?
So stationing on view would be something, station training is really, really important for, it can become the basis for so many other behaviours. Stationing is basically just teaching your animal to go to a point and wait there until you send them off to do something else. So when we're stationing our animals, we can use a station as a basis for physical exams, for the start point for an open mouth behaviour, or injection training, or medical exams, pretty much anything. Stationing on view in particular would be if, for example, you've got animals on exhibit that tend to hide away a lot of the time, and particularly in zoos and farm parks, management might want an animal to be visible. So you can use a station on view cue to ask an animal to be visible to the public at a certain time of day. Obviously just for that short period of time. I'm not saying that you're going to teach an animal to stand in the same place all day, because that's certainly not going to be great for their welfare. But you could absolutely teach a station on view cue. For example, if you had a talk that you wanted to do and this animal spends most of its time not visible, you could say, if you come back at 2:00, we'll be doing a talk, and the animal always pops out during that talk. So you could absolutely use a station on view cue for that.
What training can be given to facilitate veterinary procedures?
Veterinary procedures, we can do absolutely loads with our animals, veterinary procedure wise, and it's one of my favourite things to do, really, because gone are the days of, you manually restrain your animal to do things to it, or you have to dart it to do things. We can get our animals to cooperate with wound care and treatment. We can get them to cooperate with ultrasounds, injections, dental care, probably not extraction of a tooth or anything, but, you can certainly check inside the mouth. You can see if there's any issues. You can teach toothbrushing, blood draws. It's just about having the imagination, the skills, and the creativity as well to think, how can I modify my enclosure? How can I modify the way that I work with this animal in order to make this procedure something that they can cooperate with?
That sounds absolutely incredible. I mean, is this well known in the animal training industry, or are you quite niche and innovative?
I mean, it's getting out there. There are a lot of zoos now that are doing some really great cooperative care work with their animals. People do it with a lot of like great apes, elephants, the big cats, things like that. The fact that you can do it with smaller animals, and rabbits are a particular interest of mine because they're small and because you can pick them up. People do pick them up and hold on to them and do veterinary procedures. But actually they can learn exactly the same as any other animal can. And so I'm particularly interested in, sort of working with small animals that people think, oh, it's fine, I'll just hold on to it. Birds as well, you can do a lot of cooperative care with birds. And, all of these things are animals that perhaps historically haven't had much choice over the way that they're worked with. And that's kind of what I'm striving to drive forward. And there are places that are coming on board with it, and there's places out there who are doing some great work already. I'm just trying to help them do it, basically.
Great. Let's get back to basics, Nikki. What are the principles behind training animals, please?
I mean, there are where do you start, right? I'll tell you the principles behind the way that I work with training animals. So I work with positive reinforcement techniques. So that's in operant conditioning. Basically, behavior happens and then it is reinforced. Reinforcement is the reinforcers that I use are food and control for the animal. So I like to have the animal choosing to participate in whatever training session that I'm doing. If they say no, that's fine. I'm going to respect that because I've given them the control. I've given them the opportunity to tell me that they're not happy or not wanting to participate, I should say. So I like to make it as easy as possible for the animal to do the behavior that I want them to do. Okay, so I work a lot with antecedent arrangements, setting up the environment so that the animal is able to access reinforcers as quickly as possible, and shaping the behavior to get to where I want to. So looking for that natural variation in the behavioral repetitions, and reinforcing those that natural variety basically, and until I can get to my desired goal, and always working in a partnership with my animal. Training isn't something that we do to our animals. It's something we do with our animals. And it should be fun for everybody that's involved. If you're not having fun, you're probably not going to want to go back and train the next day. And I'm not going to tell you what your animals are thinking, but I can imagine that if they're not having fun, they probably don't want to come back the next day either.
That's great. Nikki, what are the most challenging situations you deal with?
So there's a couple of different ones. Probably the most challenging animals to work with are ones that have had sort of really aversive history with people. They've been trained in a less than desirable fashion, or maybe they've just had a really poor learning history with humans. And that can happen in zoos and farm parks as well as in domestic, pet owners and things. And usually it's just through a lack of understanding rather than anything malicious. But animals that are fearful of people through history are challenging because you start before the beginning, basically. You literally have to start with, okay, how can I get this animal to start to look forward to me approaching the enclosure rather than backing away from me? And so that's challenging. And the other challenge is people. As a consultant, usually by the time that I'm invited in to work somewhere, it means that the place is either ready to make a change or they are questioning whether what they do is best practice and could they do it better. Maybe they just want to make sure that they're up to date on the best way of doing something. But there's sometimes one or more people who are maybe not quite at that point yet. And that's always a challenge because you sometimes are questioned on, and I welcome questions. Like, absolutely, I will explain my methodology and my reasons to you till the cows come home. But sometimes that can be quite challenging if people are sort of criticizing your methods or what you're doing. And yeah, that's always a challenge. People, they're always the hardest animal to train.
How did I know you were going to say? Oh, that's brilliant. This is really, really interesting. Nikki, what are the easiest situations you deal with?
An animal that's already got a learning history where they've been trained, using positive reinforcement training throughout their lives. They already have a huge repertoire of behaviours that they know. The more training that's been done with an animal, the easier it is for them to pick up a new behaviour, because they already understand the association between, oh, the person's coming, good things happen when the person comes. These are the things that I know how to do. What can I offer? And if you know what the behaviours are that this animal already knows, you can go, oh, I now want to do this. So actually I can use that behaviour to get to that. So they're easy situations. And when you have staff members who are super enthusiastic, they really want to achieve a behaviour. Maybe there's an upcoming veterinary procedure, and last year this animal had to be darted and knocked out, and they really don't want to do that this year. So they're very motivated to put in the work, and they listen to feedback, and they send me videos, and I can tell them, oh, that's brilliant, do that again, or next time this happens, just tweak it a little bit like that. They're the best situations for me, really, because I feel that I'm helping them to make a difference.
If you've got a situation where an animal does not want to be approached within its enclosure, how do you begin?
Well, I mean, first of all, I would always rather the animal approach me rather than me approach them. So that's where I start. And to be honest, if I've got an animal who has an aversive history with people, I'm a huge fan of protected contact training, to be honest. With most things, historically, protected contact is used for animals that can harm us. So, obviously the big cats and great apes and things that you don't work in with, elephants, things that we don't want to be in with because we might be hurt. But if you use protected contact training, it helps the animal to feel safe as well. Because if we are in their space and they can't get away from us, that causes a bit of a conflict for them potentially, because they're right, okay, well, now this human is coming closer to me and I can't back away, and what do I do? And sometimes you might get behaviours that you don't want to see in that sense. You might get some, an animal trying to come towards you and bite you, or turn around and try and kick you, or, whatever, which we don't want to see. So I like to teach the animal to approach me. If I can use protected contact, I absolutely will do. If the animal is like right at the back of the enclosure and won't come anywhere near me at all, then I like to just pair my presence with something good. So basically I'll approach the enclosure, I might drop some food in or some enrichment or something, and keep on walking. And I'll do that several times during the day, just so that the animal starts to think, oh, I'm not trying to tell you what your animal's thinking, but, so the animal starts looking as I approach, looks up, there's that human that brings good things. And over time, you might find, it usually only takes a few days, you might find that animal starts actually approaching while you are there. And at that point, I would say, still keep walking past, still drop your thing in and keep going, because you don't want to force things until that animal is saying, oh, actually, no, I'm interested in coming over. And when that animal is waiting for you and you get there and you can drop your food in or your enrichment item or whatever it is, if the animal is still there, you can then drop another one in and maybe another one before you leave. So you're just building up that association of actually people are good. And protected contact wise, I was at a college a couple of weeks ago, and they had 2 alpacas who were head collar trained, as in, they have head collars put on them. But one of the staff said to me, oh, she's fine once you've got her, but she always goes away from you and you have to kind of corner her before you can put the head collar on. So we started doing some protected contact training with her, and she walked over to the fence and I just started feeding her over the fence. And we did 6 5-minute sessions over 3 days that I was there for. And by the end, we had her putting her head into the head collar and letting me put it up over the top of her ears. We didn't quite get to it's all the way on and done up, but in just 3 days of, very short sessions, she was now coming over, putting her nose through. If she didn't get her nose through the rope of the head collar, she was wiggling her head and pushing it through so that she could get her head all the way in. So, and that was an animal that previously she was used to being fed over a fence, but for a head collar, she didn't really have much choice over. So protected contact can be really useful.
Nikki, have you got the best job in the world?
Probably, yeah.
What's that term you're using, Nikki? Protective?
Protected contact is basically where you're one side of a barrier and the animal is the other side. So people, as I said, they use it a lot with animals that can harm us. So large carnivores, great apes, elephants, anything that we don't traditionally work in with because of our safety. But it can help the animal to feel safe, and therefore we can use it with all sorts. I've done it with an owl, like I've worked protected contact with a burrowing owl that's like this big, there's absolutely no danger of them harming me, but she didn't feel safe with me in her enclosure, and therefore it was better. I made much faster progress by me being outside to start with.
This sounds fascinating. Yeah, I've spoken to one other person who specialises with elephants. You probably know him. And he mentioned it first of all, and I've not heard it since, but I always wanted to follow that term up. Jerry Trayton will probably...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I
know. Nikki, you train animals. What skills or qualifications do you need to do that?
Okay, well, skill-wise, you need great observation skills. You need to be flexible and adaptable and ready to change your plan at the drop of a hat, because when we turn up to our animal enclosure, we only have half the information. The animal has the rest of it. So your plan goes out of the window pretty quickly, or it can do anyway. You need to be willing to take feedback and seek expertise from more experienced trainers, because there are always more experienced trainers, people out there who've got more knowledge than you do. You have to be willing to self-improve and self-develop. Like personally, I think continued professional development is so important, and it's something that I do myself all the time. I certainly don't think that I know everything. There's always more to learn. And you have to be able to leave your ego at the door, because, I've trained a lot of animals, but now in my role as a consultant, I am frequently going into places where I don't know the animal and I don't know the individual. I don't have a relationship with them. That's not to say I couldn't build one, but actually I'm not going to be there all the time. So it's more beneficial for me to coach the trainers, the keepers, the people that are going to be working with that animal all the time. And yes, it might be a behaviour that I've trained 50 times, but it's not beneficial in that moment for me to be the one to train that animal. It's far better for me to teach the person who's going to be doing it every day. So leave your ego at the door. It's not about you, it's about the animal and trying to do what's best for them. As for qualifications, there are several different routes that you can go down. There's degrees and things in animal behaviour. I think experience counts for a huge amount. You can know all the theory that there is to know, but without the practical experience of being able to put that into practice, for want of a better word, the theory is always useful to know, but doesn't help just on its own. I'm a certified professional bird trainer and certified professional animal trainer through the International Avian Trainers Certification Board, which it's a US based organization, although we are international. So, and I have other, sort of vocational qualifications. Dr. Susan Friedman's Living and Learning with Animals is a fantastic course that once you've taken it, you can then re-sit it as often as you like for a much lower fee. And Susan's a brilliant teacher, and her information is just so valuable that I've taken that several times now.
Raku, which books or people or meetings have most influenced your thinking about animal training?
There's two individuals really who I've learned a huge amount from. One of them is Dr. Susan Friedman, because her knowledge and the way that she delivers her information as well is just, she's a very inspiring speaker. And she's also super helpful. If you reach out to her with questions, she'll always make time to answer them for you. So she's absolutely brilliant. I would recommend her to everybody that can take her course. The other person is Steve Martin from Natural Encounters in Florida. 10, 11 years ago now, he came to a zoo that I was working at the time. And I reached out to him afterwards and basically inquired about, sort of learning from him and employment opportunities, I suppose. And he ran the Birds of the World show at the State Fair of Texas. And this happened in Dallas every year for 25 years. And during that, it basically was a road show. So they would drive all their birds and everything from Florida to Dallas and spend 3 weeks training birds, run a show 4 times a day for 3 weeks, and then close it all down and drive everybody back to Florida. And he took on interns for that. So basically he said, right, well, I need about 20 interns every year to put on this show. I think it was growing every year. I think there were 27 the last year that I did it. But basically he gave me the opportunity to go out and be an intern on this. I already had some training experience, already had some bird experience. But I learned loads from him while I was out there and his whole team. I'm actually on the board of directors with him for the International Association of Avian Trainers and Educators. And so I'm in touch with him regularly anyway, which I'm very lucky. But yeah, he had such an amazing wealth of experience and a great way of teaching and sharing his knowledge. So he sort of shaped the way that I developed into the trainer that I am now, probably, because after I did the internship there in 2011, I then took on a head of birds role where I basically revolutionized the training of the birds, completely stripped out the show, back to basics, changed everything, stopped tethering birds of prey, had everybody flying out of aviaries, no equipment on them, which is, there are a few places starting to do that now, which is brilliant, but it was quite new and novel when I first started it. And I sort of did that thinking, well, I mean, if you can do it with parrots and you can do it with cranes and storks, why do we need to have all of this equipment on our birds of prey? And I wonder if it will work. And it did. So, so yeah, he was really very inspirational for me.
Fantastic. Nikki, how would you describe the animal training industry today?
Developing, I think, is a good word. Everybody is interested in training. If you talk to any young keepers that are coming into the field nowadays, a lot of them are really interested in it, mostly because they've seen, they've either seen shows or they've seen like really flashy veterinary behaviours, basically. Training, though, it's more than just the veterinary side of it. It's more than just the demos for the public. It's sort of day-to-day, everyday management. It makes our lives easier as animal keepers. It makes the animals' lives easier and less stressful.
Nikki, how do you see it progressing over the next 10 years, the animal training industry?
I would like to see every zoo have a training and behaviour consultant or a member of staff who's a training and behaviour specialist on their team. There are a few zoos that are sort of just starting out with that now, seeing more and more collections realizing the importance of behavioral husbandry, behavior management, and positive reinforcement training. I think hopefully over the next 10 years, we might start seeing those roles popping up in more and more collections.
Nikki, do you need a degree to get into this?
You don't. It can help you. More and more places are asking for a degree when you're applying for jobs. I think a lot of that is to show that you have got the determination, I suppose, to sort of learn and dedication to stick to something. It doesn't really matter what your degree is in. If you've got an animal behaviour or an animal management degree, then yeah, absolutely, that might help you. But I think experience, hands-on, or hands-off technically, because we don't need to restrain our animals anymore, but, boots on the ground experience, that's what I should say there. Really working with and alongside your animals, that's going to teach you a huge amount. That's not to say degrees aren't important at all. I wouldn't say that, but the experience has to go hand in hand with the theoretical knowledge.
Somebody watching this who's feeling inspired to go into animal training, can you give an account, Nikki, of how your own career developed, please?
originally I wanted to be a vet. That was my goal. That was my plan. As so many young people's goal is, I wanted to work with animals, and that was the job for me. It turns out it wasn't the job for me. And that's actually because I went to a conference for sixth form students who were applying to vet school, and there was a talk from somebody who worked at a sea life centre, and they did a huge amount of rescue and rehab work with baby common seals off the North Norfolk coast, and grey seals as well, but it was predominantly commons. And he basically stood up there, talked about their work, said what they did, and said, oh, this would be a great experience for anybody looking to apply to vet school because it's so unusual. Not many people get the opportunity to do this. I applied, I went and did work experience there for 3 weeks, and then I came home, and then I went back for another 3 weeks. And that was my first animal job, basically. They offered me a position, and so we got to do so much stuff with those animals. You know, they were being released back out into the wild. So while they were there, we were rehabilitating them. Some of them had come in really dehydrated. We'd need to be giving them fluids or drips. We were tube feeding. You know, we were doing lots of really cool stuff in, you know, the aim being to release these animals back out into the wild. And I loved it. So I did that. And then I started doing talks and presenting to the audiences there, which led me on to my first job in a zoo. And actually, I was very lucky to be hired by London Zoo as one of their events team, so on their show team. But because of my public speaking background, you know, at that point, I didn't have any animal training knowledge or experience at all. I'd just been doing like rehab work and education, I suppose, talking to the public. And yeah, they hired me, and I did a summer temp job there, which was great. I worked at Colchester Zoo, and then I worked at London Zoo again, and backwards and forwards between a few places. And then I stayed at London Zoo in the end for nearly 10 years. I was there, and then I left, went off to work with Steve in the States, and did my first internship with him. Came back, and I got my section leader role at Paradise Wildlife Park. So I was there for 9 years. And at Paradise, I was running their bird team. You know, I like I mentioned, I changed the way that we ran our bird shows, changed everything that we did with the birds, their husbandry, their day-to-day care, the training, the shows, everything. And then sort of carved out a role for myself where I became the animal training coordinator across the whole site. I sort of said, oh, you know, I could help with some of the training on other teams as well, and kind of like pushed my way into a position basically that didn't really exist. And that was great for me because it gave me a lot of experience with training different species. You know, I had husbandry experience. When I was at London, I did quite a lot of training with a variety of different species, but sort of not as in an official capacity, if you know what I mean. I was a keeper that also did some training. And then at Paradise, it was like, actually, I could help all of the section leaders. I can help the team learn how to be better trainers and, you know, understand what they're doing and the principles of everything. And I started teaching workshops for the interns and the junior keepers. And it sort of was kind of a natural progression for me to try and develop this as a business. And yeah, in 2021, I left Paradise after my 9 long years and set up Shaping Behaviour, and the rest is history. So
Nikki, for anybody wanting to do what you do, working with animal behaviour, animal training, what advice can you offer, please?
Work hard. Get really good at observing your animals, describing the behaviour that you're seeing rather than labelling it. You know, we as humans, we love to say, oh, that's being hormonal, that's being territorial, that's being defensive or stubborn. But actually, that doesn't really give you very much information. It puts a label on something, which we as humans then tell ourselves a little story about what that must mean. What's actually really useful is being good at observing and describing what you're seeing. And then you can say, right, so when I approached this animal, it did this, and then I did that, which gives a lot more information to anybody else that's going to be going into that enclosure later on that day. It also helps you to figure out what you could do differently next time you approach the animal. be open to asking questions and learning, and go to as many seminars and talks and conferences where there's people discussing behaviour and training as possible, and ask those people questions. Ask them, oh, so I noticed when you did this, but why did you do it like that? And don't be afraid to ask those questions. If somebody asks me why I do something, and if I want to say, oh, because I've always done it that way, I have to take myself out the back and have a little word, because because we should always be trying to do better than the way that things were done in the past, right? And that's the same for the way that I do things now as well. If I look at some of the things that I've done, or the ways that I've trained things over the years, I wouldn't do them now. But at the time, I was doing the best that I knew how to. So you've got to be prepared to recognize the things that sometimes they move on, and you go, oh, actually, maybe that wasn't the best way to do that, and I will do it differently the next time I need to, and be humble in that respect.
Nikki, what's the most endangered species you've worked with?
A Chinese alligator, white-naped mangabees.
Nikki, what is, for somebody wanting to read more on this, to get themselves immersed in the literature, what would be a good journal or starter textbook?
A good start point is a book by somebody called Karen Pryor. It's called Don't Shoot the Dog. It's quite an old book now, but it's still got a lot of really useful information, and it's sort of easy to digest in bite-sized chunks for somebody just starting out. So that's a book that I quite often recommend. Also, if you look at, I've mentioned Dr. Susan Friedman a couple of times, but on her website, which is behaviourworks.org, without the U, because she's American, her website has got a lot of papers that she's written, papers that she's presented, that are free access, and you can just click on them, download them and read them, and they're really useful. There's a lot on there about parrots and parrot behaviour, because she works with a lot of like pet owners, parrot pet owners and things. But yeah, there's a lot on there, which, I mean, it can be applied to any species. That's the beauty of behavioural science, right? It is a science, and that means that we can apply it to every species, in whatever setting that you want. So yeah, there's lots of good resources on there as well.
Nikki, you're the director of Shaping Behaviour. Thank you very much indeed for being on the Practical Animal channel, Nikki Plaskett.
Thank you very much.